This is Professor Hall, and this is the second paper that I wanted you guys to take a look at when looking at how to write literature. So in terms of writing papers, this paper is pretty good. There are one or two things with organization that are not great. There's a few problems with grammar here and there's some repetition. But overall, this is not a bad example of how to do a literary argument. So the first thing you kind of notice here is that she has entitled this Death and Isolation in A Rose for Emily. What's nice about that is I know right from her title what she's going to be focusing in on, and she didn't just use the title of the story. She kind of added to it. So in the first paragraph, we have a little bit about the story. I think this is funny, a series of complications to unravel. It's sort of like putting it mildly in what happens to Emily. But she has her reasons. The theme of death and isolation throughout the story is developed with the use of symbolism, point of view, the narration, and characterization. So I know from this that she thinks the theme is death and isolation. Her reasons are symbolism 1, point of view 2, and characterization 3. Good. The central message conveyed by the author is that when people are isolated, it hurts not only them, but the community as a whole. And there we have our claim. And you can sometimes people put the claim first, and then they put the reasons. Here she did the opposite. It's fine. It works either way. The nice thing is that it's a very clear claim. It's a strong argument, and it's a valid interpretation of the text. So again, I'm only going to talk about a couple paragraphs because this is about a 5-page essay. If you want to read all of my comments and read the whole thing as you go to prepare for your essay, the paper version is also here. It's in a Word document in this folder on Blackboard, so you can take a look at that later on. In the second paragraph, we have just a brief summary of the story, beginning, middle, end. It's nice. It's a short 1-paragraph summary. The problem sometimes with literary analysis papers is that people just want to do summary and they don't actually analyze anything. So it's nice here that I have, here's what happened in the beginning, the middle, the end, and then let's dig into what that means. So the first paragraph that I really want to look at is here. We talked about that Teal method, having a topic sentence, having explanation, having evidence, from the text, and then having analysis and linking it to the next point. And this paragraph does that really well. While the resounding theme of death is carried throughout the story by the deaths of Emily and her father and her lover Homer, isolation is the primary theme of Faulkner's work. There we have... boom, we have a good topic sentence. Now she talks about where she can find that isolation. This is interesting because it seems like summary, but if you look, it's really not. She's not just recapping the events, right? She talks to you about how her isolation began because her family was wealthy. Her father was a plantation owner who was too good for the people in the town. As the South decayed, as you can listen to in the video about Southern Gothic, this is a lot about the South decaying after the Civil War, and so did Emily's family, as they're kind of a symbol for the South, the Old South. At some point, they lost their family fortune and were unable to pay taxes. Thus, her poverty again separated her from others. Now, I thought that this was an interesting and astute analysis because astute means like on point. It's on point because she's isolated in the beginning because she's wealthy, and then she becomes poor and she's isolated again. And it's an interesting comment about how money can kind of separate us from each other. The collective narrator stops worshiping her and begins viewing her as an oddity. So that's one of the ways that she is isolated. This is apparent when the narrators say, now we have our quote. You will notice it is properly introduced. The narrators say, comma, and then the quote. And we're going to put the quote in blue. The quality of her father, which had thwarted her woman's life so many times, had been too virulent and furious to die. When we next saw Miss Emily, she had grown fat and her hair was turning gray. So then the author of this explains, you don't have to do this, you can explain it a different way. She kind of broke down the word thwarted and explained what that meant. And then she explains that this is what Emily's father did to her woman's life. He ruined it. It's her analysis. I'm going to put it in green. He ruined her womanhood by trying to keep her a child, one who was isolated and unable to participate in the world. And therefore, she could never date or marry or have children of her own. So when she skipped her young adult life, and the next time she's seen, she's fat and turning gray and is an object of ridicule. Interesting way to break things down. If you look at the paragraph as a whole, I'll zoom out a little bit. We have the topic sentence here, the first sentence. Then we have some evidence of a nature where she's kind of giving her reasons. So we have the claim in the first sentence, the reasons in the second and third and fourth sentences. And then here we have the evidence, and then there's the analysis of the evidence. You notice that the blue is about a third of the paragraph, and that's really what you want. You don't want it to be all of their words. You really want that balance, that 1-to-3 balance, right, that we talked about in the video about how to do a literary analysis. So then the link part, that L part of teal, kind of comes here. Faulkner also uses symbolism to develop the theme of isolation. So she's been talking here a little bit about the narrator and how isolation is really more important theme than death. That's kind of her thesis, if you will. And then she links it to her next point and goes on to talk about isolation. So the next paragraph that I want to look at, I'm going to scan down a little bit for you guys. Let's see here. Sorry. Just trying to find where I wanted. One of the things... Oh, here we go. This paragraph. Sorry. So, Faulkner also uses the point of view of a collective narrator to further develop the theme of death and isolation. That is her topic sentence. To introduce her next point. The narrator in this story is multiple first person. That's true. I think I talked about that in another video. And what's interesting here is that she has some quotes, very short quotes, you notice, we're doing these in blue, from the text. Then she kind of explains it, which I'm going to put in green. Then she has another quotation, this time from a secondary source. Now, I have a different video later on about secondary sources, what those are, and how to use them. Basically, a secondary source is something that comments on the primary source, which is the play or the poem or the story that you're reading. So here, she has the quotation from the secondary source. And then she has an analysis, which I'm again going to put in green. And then she kind of introduces the next idea, yellow, and she has another short quotation followed by a little bit of analysis. Now, I will say, I think that this could have been broken into 2 paragraphs. You can see this, it's not until the bedroom scene when the townspeople, which should be one word, are referred to as something other than the third person. That really, I think, is kind of like the link to go into your next point. So that might have been helpful. But what she did here that I do think is interesting is she has They say, whenever we saw Emily and us men, this shows that the narrator is a group of people from the town. They are talking and acting together while Emily is alone, being stared at by the rest of them. This also holds true until the funeral for Emily. As explained by Joseph M. Garrison of Mary Baldwin College in the article Studies on Short Fiction, quote, "We were struck by the contrast between the way in which the narrator describes the bedroom scene and the way in which he has described the other scenes in the story, some of which he did not even see." Now, this really should be they, right? This is an older article, so he's using the male pronouns here, but it's more than one person. So then she kind of explains that quote for the reader. What's nice about that, too, is that sometimes your reader won't have read the secondary source. Maybe they didn't even read the story. They're just reading this article to kind of inform them. So it's good that she kind of explains that for the reader, and then she ties it back into her thesis. Garrison shows that a narration change does occur over the course of the short story. This helps to develop the theme of isolation by showing that even the people of the town do not want to be considered to have any affiliation to Emily or the Grierson family until the death of Emily. And then she goes into the next point about the bedroom scene and how that's described differently. So the balance here, pretty good. Maybe a little bit more analysis because we have such a long quote here, but for the most part, solid. And that's basically it. That's how you can structure a literary argument. Introducing the quotes, citing the quotes, explaining the quotes for your audience, and making sure that your words count. Not using things like, this was really big in the story, or there's a lot of narration. Every story has narration, right? So explain to me what it means. Explain to me how you interpret it. And I look forward to reading your work. Thanks, guys.